going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Blood Hunters, The Rise of the Hybrids. So I recently did a review for a film called Case 347, and if you watched that review, I talked about the fact that I was actually reached out to by a girl named Jenna, who is a publicist for a company called Dark Host, and they were going to be distributing a film called Case 347, and she asked me if I wanted to watch it and review it, and I actually got to see that film before it released. It is now already out, and you can find all the information in that video's description box as far as where you can actually watch the film. But yeah, it was really cool to be able to get sent a screener to see a movie before the movie comes out, and this film is exactly the same case. Jenna was really cool about the fact that I gave an honest review of the other film. I'll be honest, I didn't love it, and I was really honest about it in my review, and she appreciated that, and she gave me the opportunity to review more films that they have coming out. So that is what this film is. So a big thanks again to Jenna from Dark Coast and to Dark Coast as an overall. I really appreciate just the ability to watch a new film before it even comes out. I think that's just super cool, and that on its own has just got me super excited to talk about this movie. Now with that said, I gotta be honest, I didn't love this film. This is a film that when it started, I was actually really into it. The basic premise is that you have kind of a post-apocalyptic world to an extent. The world's not necessarily what it is right now. I feel like I didn't get a great sense of the world in this movie, but from what I gathered, the world has essentially gone to shit, and there are these vampiric creatures. I'm gonna call them the vampire creatures. They have a lot of the same abilities as vampires, and they're able to create more of themselves by biting onto people, similar to vampires. They're not limited to the same rules as vampires, but they're very vampiric. They don't call themselves vampires, and I know they're not vampires, but that's essentially what they were to me. They were these vampiric characters that were just creating an army of more vampire type minions. You have these people called blood hunters, who are the people who take these creatures down, and that's essentially the premise of this film. And this is something that apparently is really near and dear to the heart of the director, who also stars in the film as a character named Bolo. Yeah, I've looked through his filmography, and it shows that he has done two short films of this same premise. I've never seen any of those, so this is just me going in blind to this. This was the first ever feature-length film of this idea that he has. So yeah, I was interested to check it out. The poster looked pretty cool, and I watched the trailer before watching it, and I was into the idea. I definitely wanted to check it out, and after watching it, my biggest praise that I can give this film is the combat and all the action sequences in this film. They're easily the most well-edited parts of the film, and they're really well choreographed, and I found them to be pretty fun. They're a little cheesy at times, and there are little moments where I feel the camera angles didn't necessarily elevate the action that was happening on screen, but for the most part, that's definitely the strongest part of this film, and I think it's where all the performers really were able to show their skills, because after I looked into it a little bit, majority of the cast in this film are MMA fighters or different kinds of martial artists or fighters as an overall. So when they were able to fight and do their choreography, that's really where they were able to shine in this film, and I think that's without a doubt the best part of this film. On top of that, I really did enjoy the way this film was shot. There's a lot of moments with the lighting being really good. There are a few moments where I didn't love the lighting and the angles that they were using, but for the most part, I do enjoy the way this film was shot. It's nothing crazy in a lot of ways. Some people may just see the way this film is shot and think it's very standard to a lot of other films, and I can definitely agree with that. My biggest gripes with this film were that the story was just kind of all over the place. At first, it kind of felt like it was going to be like this fantasy kind of movie, and then once it got into it, it was more of like a combat, boots on the ground kind of story with these, creatures in it, these people that have abilities that are these vampires essentially. As time went on, I felt that majority of the story, about the first 40 minutes of the film, is all exposition. It's just characters telling you about the past and what's led them to this situation. It seems like all of the interesting things about these characters and the development of these characters all happened in the past, and the film just tries to cram that down your throat with tons and tons of information, and by the end of the movie, you feel like you've only learned about these characters through these stories and them talking about what's happened. But there's really never anything that happens in the film itself that feels like it develops or grows that character on their own. Something that was really hit or miss for me in this film were the performances. There were moments where some performances were actually pretty strong and I was really into them, and then there were some moments where they just was not into what was going on, and it was just so clear that they were acting. It was just, you didn't buy into it, you know what I mean? There were some moments where I was really into the performers and I was believing what was happening, and there was a believable performance there, but then you could literally go to the next scene and some of the actors who may have been weaker in the last scene are stronger in this scene, and the people who were stronger in the last scene are weaker in this one. So it just felt like it was constantly a back and forth as far as the acting. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, sometimes from the same actor. So there was nobody that really stood out to me as a phenomenal actor. There were a few people that in my mind as I watched it, I definitely was into them a little bit more. But I feel like the film really didn't give you any time with a lot of these characters. Like I said, majority of the setup and everything that's happening is all exposition based, just conversations. It's not really events that are going on. When you go to ramp up for the last half of the movie, the whole last half of the film is action and just the climax of the film. When I felt the climax of the film was rising up and it felt like we were leading up to that, I go, man, how long have I been watching this movie? Like, are we already here? And when I checked, there was still another half of the movie to go, and I thought, oh, maybe this is just the middle battle, but it was just the beginning of the final battle. So yeah, like the whole last half of the movie is where the film shines for me, just because that's where majority of the really cool action is. But as far as the characters go and the story goes, you really couldn't care less, to be honest. I think that this is a film that is not going to really grip people as far as the story goes. There are performances that worked for me at times, but a lot of it was really cheesy. And this is the lower budget film, so I do want to, take that into consideration. But it's clear the majority of the budget of this film went to the action and the choreography and the camera work, whereas a lot of the special effects and the performances in this film were definitely on the lesser side of this film. It just was a film that I just didn't find myself in love with. It's a film that has some really cool action. I enjoy the premise, but it just felt like it was so choppy. There are moments of this film where you can definitely see it's heavily inspired by comic book movies or comic books in general, as well as anime. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. I enjoyed seeing that inspiration in the work itself. But there were these weird transitions where it was kind of at the end of a scene and it would stop and it would pan out and it would go to a comic book frame, an actual comic book panel, and then it would just switch to another comic book panel and start that scene up. And I just felt like it was a little random when it would happen. Sometimes I would forget that that was part of the movie and it just kind of randomly would happen. Yeah, the more I think about this movie, there are some good performances, and the biggest thing that I can really praise about this film is definitely the action and the choreography, because again, these people were actually fighters, so that's really where they were able to shine. But yeah, I just felt like I had no attachment to the characters. I had no attachment to the story. The story was kind of confusing. It was kind of all over the place. You spend very little time with all the characters. There's a character that dies at one point, you don't care. There are characters that kiss at one point, you don't really care. It doesn't really feel earned. It doesn't really feel deserved. You don't really feel like you had the time to fall in love with these characters and really understand their motivations and what it is about their story that we should even care about, And it sucks to say that, again, here I am reviewing another film that I got the opportunity to watch early, but I definitely just have to be honest about the fact that the film just did not do it for me. This isn't a terrible film. There are things to praise about it, but I can't really go ahead and just give you guys my full recommendation on this. If this is something that sounds interesting to you and you're just curious on checking it out, I do recommend checking it out just for that alone. Down below in the description box, you guys can find the links for everywhere that this movie will be on, all the digital platforms it'll be on. It is not out just yet, but it will be out soon. Again, I am super grateful to Dark Coast and to Jenna from Dark Coast for reaching out to me and allowing me to review this film and watch it. There are things about it that I like, guys, but on an overall level, it just seemed like a vision from somebody who was really passionate to make this story, but everybody kind of just let him do what he wanted to do, which I get and I appreciate, and I like the fact that he was able to make the movie he wanted. But I just felt at the end of the movie, I just didn't care what was going on. It leaves you on a cliffhanger, and it's not really a film that you feel you care enough about to really care about what's going to happen, because you don't really have any attachment to these characters. Again, I was kind of confused at times, and for a long time I forgot about the big bad of the story. The big bad of the story, you see him at one point at the beginning of the movie and you see him at the very end of the movie. They kind of like left him as a mysterious figure for the next movie, I suppose, but it just feels like you just don't care. The big bads of this movie were okay. There's one dude that I thought was pretty fine, but then there's one guy that has this horrible set of teeth that he has in for like the kind of vampire teeth, where they're not vampire teeth, but like just sharp teeth, and it literally looks like somebody who has those vampire teeth that you get at like Chuck E. Cheese in their mouth. That's literally what it felt like in this movie as I was watching it. Like, this guy gave probably one of the worst performances I've seen in any recent film. The performance was laughable to a point, and especially since he had the fake teeth in his mouth, it just felt like he really couldn't speak properly. His accent was all off. He was trying to do some sort of accent and some sort of voice, and it was really bad. And yeah, I hate to shit on this movie, but there was a lot about this movie that I just did not love. There was a lot about it that just made me question what the hell was going on. A lot of things that were not explained, a lot of things that were left to just continually being explained without any stakes, without any weight behind the events that happened in the film for you to even care. It's just really just setting up these characters based on stuff in the past that you're supposed to somewhat care about, but you just don't. And Man, you know, I hate feeling this way, because if you watch my reviews, I do my best to have really positive takes on films. You know, even if the film is not great for me, even if it's something that I'm not really into, then you know, I still try to praise what it is that I enjoyed about the film. And I also am a big fan of campy films. I don't need things to be perfect at all times. I can lean into a film that knows what it is and leans into the cheesiness. So that's where I could forgive some of the bad effects and, you know, some of the bad performances. But in this film, it's a film that's taking itself seriously. It doesn't joke around. It's not really a funny, lighthearted, toned film. It is a very serious film, and it's trying to sell you on this premise and in these characters and the story. And I just felt like it was just so all over the place, the narrative, and I just didn't have any time with the characters. I just didn't care about anything that really happened by the end of the film. One thing I didn't mention a moment ago about the performances was the fact that when you watch this movie, it feels like it's not necessarily the emotion on their face that they're not able to sell as far as the acting. It's just the dialogue and the delivery of the dialogue in this film that just felt flat for me plenty of times, and it just really did seem like they were acting. One scene that I just found to be hilarious, and it is a perfect example of what kind of movie I watch. This main girl that's in the film at one point goes up and she meets the leaders of this camp of the blood hunters, and she literally asks the master of all of them, the main guy, like, you know, what am I doing here? And it pans in on him really quickly, and it just puts on this really abrupt music, and he's like, you need to figure that out for yourself. And then she's just kind of like, oh, and then she walks away. What? Like, that's literally a scene in this film, and there's just so many things where characters make decisions and do things or say things, and you're just like, what? On overall, I just found this film to be really messy as far as the story goes. I was not in love with what was happening in this film. There was things I liked about it. As far as the action goes, it's definitely the biggest thing to praise, but yeah, you know, outside of the cinematography at times, the action and the choreography, I just wasn't really in love with this film. I can't necessarily recommend it, guys, but if you are interested in it, if any of the clips that have appeared throughout this interest you, definitely go check out down below in the description box all the places that you can find this film when it releases. Thank you again to Jenna and Dark Coast for allowing me to watch this film early and to review it. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button to see more videos, and I will see each and every single one of you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.